Hello and welcome to the Habitat Project podcast, where we talk about cultivating good habits, pursuing our dreams, and enjoying life. I am Anthony, and these are my findings on how to make the most out of each day and enjoy the process along the way. Let's go. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Habitat Project podcast. It's been a while. It's been almost a year actually since I've last posted an episode. So I don't want to call this a comeback. This is a new start. Before we get into the episode today, I just want to give a few life updates about what's been going on in the last year or so. So basically, in July 2023, Leah and I moved to Melbourne, and this is where we've been living since. In this move, Louis also came with us, but he needed to go to Singapore because Australia doesn't allow animals to come in directly from Indonesia. So Louis spent a month in Singapore. And Leah actually stayed in Singapore for that month whilst he was in quarantine. After quarantine, he needed to stay for an additional 6 months, and we found this lady who this is what she does. She's this retired lady, Yenny, God bless her. She took care of Louis along with other doggies at her apartment, doggies that are traveling through Singapore to go to other countries. So Louis stayed there for 6 months before coming to Australia, and he came earlier this year. He actually got out of quarantine in Melbourne on Australia Day. Since moving to Melbourne, there has been a few things that I've been working on. Number one is to get my certification as a meditation teacher. So even though I've been practicing meditation since uni, I didn't really receive any formal training. And through this certification with the Australian Centre of Mindfulness and Meditation, I've been able to learn a lot of different techniques, a lot of different ways of teaching meditation and of practicing meditation. So that's been a really cool journey. I'm actually in the final assessment stage right now, and hopefully we'll finish this and get the certification in the next couple of weeks. Along with that, I've been also teaching at a meditation center in South Melbourne. Started off being a men's circle, did that starting June of this year, but now we've just progressed into regular meditation classes. So it's been a cool experience to be able to teach and guide meditation at a meditation center. Mirosuna is a beautiful space. The founder Sally has put a lot of attention into the details, from the flooring to the lighting, to the sound. Everything about the space just creates this atmosphere that allows those that practice there to feel present, to feel grounded, and to be able to create space for change. I've also been lucky enough to be part of two CrossFit communities here, one being CrossFit South Wharf, and the other is CrossFit CBD. CrossFit South Wharf is a gym that is about 1 kilometre away from where we live, and I joined that pretty much the same month of us arriving, and being part of that community has made my transition into life in Melbourne very easy. CrossFit CBD is in the CBD in the city, and this is a awesome gym, awesome community where the owners Carl and Steph take amazing care of their community. Their coaching is nothing like I've ever seen before. It is world class coaching, and I've been lucky enough to learn from them, to be a part of their coaching staff for about a year. And that brings us to what I've been setting up for myself here in terms of business. So I stopped coaching at CrossFit CBD in September. And throughout this process, throughout this whole year, I've been setting up the company to open a functional fitness training center that also teaches mindfulness meditation. So I want to be able to combine these two modalities and to serve stressed out professionals and entrepreneurs to be able to train their mind, train their body, and be able to handle any challenges, any issues, any crisis that come our way. So since September, where I thought that the process of opening this first location for Habitat Mind Body was going to pick up, it had actually, in reality, that's not actually what happened, which brings us to, I guess, the main point of this episode, which is to talk about this crisis period that I'm going through, or I feel like we're towards the end of the big crisis period. I've been able to get through things, and on the back of that, I felt like this was a perfect time to record this episode. Still not sure whether or not this will be published, to be honest, but in previous episodes, or when I first started doing this podcast, I was, I think, leveraging a lot on the experience of going through the crisis of the downfall, or the crisis period of our family business, when the tsunami and earthquake destroyed the power plant. Now, with this current crisis, I felt like this was a good time to harness the situation, embrace the challenge, embrace the crisis, and use this experience to move forward. Use this experience use this pressure to do the things that I need to do in order for us to find a solution and be able to move forward. So one of the things is starting up the podcast again. So here we are. So what happened in the last few weeks, I guess towards the end of September to the start of October, are a few, I guess, relatively massive things that needed to happen, and all happening at once. So the first thing being a emergency and that needed me to go back to Jakarta, and that took about a week, and that was, I guess, a brutal travel schedule, and I was just beat up, emotionally beat up, physically from that trip. The second thing that was happening is that Leah needed surgery. Although it was a planned surgery, it was still surgery, and there was stress and I guess uncertainty to a certain degree to do with that. Also, at the same time, we received a notice to vacate for our apartment. Originally, when we first moved into this apartment, we were informed that this was an investment property owned by an investment company, and that they would probably be keeping it, for a while, for the price to increase, to make the capital gains. But over the last year, there's been lots of changes in the Australian economy, specifically in Victoria or in Melbourne, in terms of there being a large increase in demand for housing, whilst there was just not enough supply. So these changes, along with some regulatory changes, meant that there had been a lot of buying and selling of property, and our specific unit was one in the latest, sell-off that has been made by the owner, by the landlord, and so we needed to move out before the end of November. So this was thrown into the mix. And lastly, the negotiations for the lease for the business, it had halted towards the beginning of October. I didn't know whether or not we were going to be able to go ahead and have this space in order to start the business. Meanwhile, throughout all of this, resources are constantly being used, and that put a lot of pressure into the whole situation. So what happened is when I came back from Jakarta, I felt the same level of stress, or my mind and body had the same sort of stress response that I had experienced when we went through the natural disaster. So in those first few days after coming back, I couldn't sleep. I was waking up every hour. Again, for those that are hearing this for the first time, I had cold sweat. Woke up in cold sweat. I would need to change clothes and try to fall back asleep. Food had no taste. I couldn't eat, and because of the lack of sleep, I think mostly the emotional turbulence was very high. It was very turbulent. Those first few days, I had a few emotional breakdowns. I didn't know how to function, and it was tough. So I wanted to talk about what that situation was like, with all of these things happening all at once. Leah was also feeling her emotions and her fears, and we were getting into arguments, and we were just we were a mess. I was a mess for sure. Now, this is interesting because I still had those tools, those habits, those tactics that I used to get through the challenges from before, but that didn't stop these things from happening. But what I noticed was the period of time shortened significantly. The period of time that I was in this emotional breakdown mode was shortened significantly. The other difference between this time and last time is that this time I was going through this with Leah. I also felt somewhat responsible for making the decision to move from Jakarta to here, and now there's all these challenges in front of us. So I don't know if that's a fair assessment or not, but that was something that I did feel. And I guess I felt like, this is now that we're on our own here, and that we need to be able to get through this. Were we able to, find somewhere to live? Did we need to, were we going to be, out on the streets? Was I going to fail in these business, in this negotiation for the business? What was going to happen for Leah's surgery and things like that? And it was just a lot to handle all at once. Through this all, what I had found useful, or I guess the overarching lesson, was actually something that came to me, or was told to me, in one of the first days when I was having the emotional breakdown. So I had a call with my brother Mike, and I basically talked to him about, what was going on and how I was feeling, and had another emotional breakdown with him on the phone. And he mentioned something that was very interesting, which was is called Parkinson's law. And Parkinson's law basically says that things fill up the space that we give it. So at that time, there were all these things that needed to happen, and I didn't know how I was going to handle it, or if I had how to get through it. And he basically shared his experience, and how he handles the pressure and the challenges that he has, having three young children living in Japan. And he told me this thing about Parkinson's law, which is that the things are going to happen if you have a deadline. By the deadline, whatever's going to happen, something is going to happen. So just go through it, use that deadline to your advantage, or embrace that resistance and lean into the stress, lean into the problem, lean into what needed to be done. At the time when he told me that, it did make sense, but it was very difficult to embrace. I was still very much in my feelings, very much in my emotions, very, very high stress response, very fearful. The monkey mind, or the hurt child, or that part of my mind was still in pain, was still in fear mode. But as the days went by, I embraced that. I thought about that more. I tried to look to see, okay, so all of these things happening, something will happen. Of course, I need to do it, but I need to take action. But how do I use this situation or this pressure to push me, or pull me to take action? So things like, if I'm not able to sleep, then I might as well use that time to be productive, which during those times, at those nights, meant looking up different places to move into. And I'm not saying that is great for sleep, because it definitely didn't allow me to sleep better, but it did give something for me to do. And I felt like whenever I was able to make a few inquiries, or schedule a few inspections, or be able to make a few applications, then at least I've done something, and then I can try to go back to sleep. So that was one of the things that I did during that period. And the second thing was, I relied massively on yoga nidra and meditation. So during that time, my central nervous system was just in fight or flight mode, which is why there was the not being able to sleep, the no appetite, and things like that. So I used a lot of yoga nidra during those times, whether it was trying to fall back asleep at night, or sometimes even in the morning, because I would have been waking up. I was waking up every few hours. So just before actually getting out of bed, a yoga nidra practice was able to at least calm the nervous system down a little bit before starting my day. And I'll actually put the yoga nidra that I was doing at that time into the description of this episode for those of you that wanna check it out. Her name is Ali Boothroyd on YouTube. She has I really like her voice. I really like the way that she guides the yoga nidra practice, and yeah, it was very helpful for me. In terms of meditation, I did many different types of meditation during that time, because the thoughts were looping into negative, spirals, with dark thoughts, harmful thoughts towards myself and things like that. Sometimes the silent meditations were just not very useful, because it was very difficult for me to come out of those thoughts, or to separate myself from those thoughts, even with all the practice that I've had before. So there was a lot of guided meditation. I use both guided meditation from the ACMM library, and also guided meditation from the Waking Up app. What I found to be useful during this time was an observation of the emotions and the thought. Of course, that's the mindfulness practice that I've practiced before, but because this is now in crisis mode, it was very interesting to see how the mind was behaving during this period. And one technique that I've learned in the ACMM course is called the one seat meditation, or one seat technique. And this technique basically allows the practitioner to sit and allow for whatever thoughts, emotions, narrative, feelings to appear, and to sit back and to observe, or to allow for these things to appear, and to sit there, to be non-judgmental about it, to not have continuous or additional storylines about it. And I found that was very soothing and very useful, because the thoughts at that time was so dark and harmful and negative, scary. If I tried to come back to the present, whether that was anchoring to physical sensations, or my visual field, or any sensations, or my breathing, it was very short-lived, and then it went back to the negative thoughts again. That was the pattern at that time. But when I practiced using the one seat technique, it was because there wasn't a fighting or additional resistance, but it was an allowing for the thoughts or emotions or narrative to unfold. The coming back to stillness, or getting, or the thoughts dissolved on its own and moved on its own. The emotions were able to be processed and moved on its own, and an openness and stillness I felt was able to be felt after that, and that was something that was very interesting and not necessarily new, but new in this context. I guess when I first learned this technique in the course, I didn't have a crisis. I wasn't going through a crisis. We've just moved to Melbourne, and maybe there was a bit of a, we were in our little honeymoon period post the move. So there wasn't like a resistance or a challenge or a crisis that I was going through. But this one seat technique definitely was very helpful to help me be able to process my emotions, process the thoughts, let them pass through, and bring myself into the present to be able to handle the tasks for the day. Journaling was the other thing that helped me massively during this period. In this course, I also took the Journaling for Clarity elective, which taught a lot of different journaling techniques. In the beginning of this crisis, the thoughts were just everywhere. They were just everywhere, dark, harmful, negative. So I used the automatic writing and automatic drawing, mostly automatic writing technique before any journaling or any meditation. So basically, I would sit down and I would just allow for whatever thoughts and energy to come through and get onto the page. And this allowed a space for, I guess, the thoughts or that energy to be processed, to run its course. And only after that, I found, or that helped in coming to an openness and stillness in the meditation. And the second technique that I use was a letter from, or to and from, inner loving wisdom. And this particular technique was very powerful for me. So I would write a letter from myself in this condition, going through these crises, going with these thoughts and emotions, and I would write to the inner loving wisdom. And basically I would lay out, how I felt. I would lay out the problems that are within this crisis. So, the things with the surgery, how I felt about that, us needing to find an apartment or finding a house or finding a place to live and not knowing where we're going to end up, or if we're able to get anywhere at all. Things with the business, with the lease, and having to not knowing whether or not this can continue, and also like the additional investments and that needed to be made in order to make this into a reality. So I would write that to this entity or this being or this this inner loving wisdom, and then I would meditate to allow for the central nervous system to go back from to go from fight or flight to calm down the central nervous system and go into rest and digest mode. So that allowed the mind and body to calm down. And in that stillness, usually then the thoughts the negative thoughts would have run its course. And then in that stillness is when insights, guidance, inspiration, messages from inner loving wisdom would appear. And sometimes it would appear as narrative or monologue. Sometimes it would appear as a sensation. And I found that in that practice, sometimes when those thoughts appear, the practice would be to just sit back and observe. Sometimes I would run away. Those would run away with those thoughts. But at least those thoughts were more positive, more insightful, inspiring, motivating, and showed clarity on what to do instead of the negative, scary, harmful thoughts. So that would be the meditation practice. And then coming out of that, I would sit down and journal again. This time I would write a letter back from inner loving wisdom to me. And I would bring the insights, the sensations, whatever was being observed during the openness of the meditation back down onto the page, and write a letter to me on how to handle the situation for that particular day, because that we're still going through it now, but just going through it a day at a time. And the letter would be the differences in the letter I found is also interesting. So with my letter to Inner Loving Wisdom, it's obviously written in my point of view, and usually it's quite formal. I would have proper sentence structure, grammar, and things like that. I would have examples of the problems, and it would be quite a well-structured writing, I feel. And sometimes coming back from this inner loving wisdom state, the letter usually is quite informal, quick, sharp, to the point, yet it has a loving quality to it. So it's almost like maybe a parent would, casually give their advice to a young child who is worried about something. I guess that would be a way that I can describe that. So usually the letter would be the letter from Inner Loving Wisdom would be written in a way that would be loving and caring and soothing, but the instructions would be, very quick, very sharp, and very clear. Focus on this. Look at this. What about this perspective? You still got this. This is what you can do. Do this next. Do this now. Do this today. This kind of instruction. So I would do that, and this practice usually starts, in the morning before I get into the tasks of the day, and during those first few days, or even maybe for the first week or 2 weeks of all this, I would actually sometimes need to come back to do this a few times throughout the day when the emotions get just too overwhelming, and the thoughts were just too overwhelming. I would come back and do it again. So it was almost like doing this practice, then going off to do the things that needed to be done, the next steps, the next available steps, using the resources that I have, and then coming back if things get too overwhelming, and resetting and realigning and finding clarity again, and then going back and tackling more tasks. So that was how the days were in the first couple of weeks, I think. And then slowly, as things began to progress, Leah's surgery went well and she's recovering. We found direction in where we wanted to live, and had more applications and inspections, and then the lease negotiations went well as well, and we were able to take steps forward. As things began to unfold, things were not as overwhelming, and I was able to take on one task to the next without needing to reset so much, or process the emotions so much, or soothe the monkey mind, or hurt child, or that part of my brain so much, and be able to be functional, be able to be effective. The other massive thing throughout this whole process was being able to connect and talk to and have support from my family and friends. This is massive. This is the thing that got me through, alongside with the meditation and journaling techniques. But being able to talk to my parents, being able to talk to my brother, being able to talk to different friends that I called, and just to update them what's going on, and to get support from them, for them to help me put things into perspective, share their experiences, give input on different possible steps to take, telling me not to worry about certain things first, and to focus on other things instead. All of this was massive. Being able to lean into this with my family and friends, I think, deepened our relationship and our understanding as well, and I'm deeply grateful for that, to be able to do that as well. Lastly, eating was very difficult in the beginning. Things just really had no taste. There was no appetite. In my stress response is, I think, the stomach is one of the things that gets affected physically. So I would feel bloated, like a high acidity level in the stomach, and I wouldn't be able to eat. The thing that helped me with this was to get pre-made meals. I was getting pre-made meals from CrossFit Wharf. Shout out to Yodo Meals. I was getting pre-made meals so that we didn't have to think too much about cooking, and I was able to just heat up the meals and make sure that I was eating, because I think at that time, there was still another step, in organizing food and things like that, I would have just not eaten, and that would have made things worse. Training, that it was difficult to train. I felt I felt sick. We did get the flu throughout this period as well, both Leah and I, and so training was just getting into the gym and to move, only one piece a day, if that, but making sure that I got movement in there. What I noticed was, after that first couple of days where I had the big emotional breakdowns, nervous breakdown, and I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, and I was sick, and I was a mess, the mind was the mind was just not able to want to do things. So there was this, I guess, a low dopamine state. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to take action. I didn't want to do things. It was just despair, hopelessness, and a lot of sadness in that time. But the first workout after those first few days, I noticed the mind instantly change. The mind went from these negative loops to looking for possibilities. And something that my mind does, I'm not sure if everybody does this, is it even went to the extremes of seeing that big goal being achieved, or the possibility of having that big goal achieved. And that kind of occurred during the first training session. So it was like I felt this, I felt the possibility of being able to achieve the goals, and to resolve these problems that were in front of me, that we were going through. I felt this surge of energy to be able to get through them, to actually tackle the tasks. And I think that was the increase in dopamine, that there was this expectation, an expectation was created to be able to handle these challenges and to achieve these goals. And that was really cool feeling. Something similar did happen during the natural disaster crisis that our family business went through, when I stopped training completely at that time. And when I first started training, it was a similar feeling. Since I think forgotten what that felt like, and this was a cool reminder, or an interesting observation about that happening, about the way that my mind worked during that time. And and what happens during a training session. So that's what's been happening, and that's the crisis that we went through. I'm still going through, actually, but now we do have an apartment to move into in the next in 2 weeks' time. We do have an apartment to move into. Lease negotiations, as I mentioned, has gone well, and we are progressing, and I'm in the process of getting the drawings approved so that I can get my building permit, and we can start building the functional fitness and meditation space, start building Habitat Mind Body, and yeah, we're just be able to get through things one day at a time to the best of my ability with the resources that I have. And on the back of all of that, I felt this morning that this was a perfect time to record this podcast, because this was I wanted to, I guess, embrace this crisis and make use of this crisis and channel the energy, the process, the feelings, the narrative, all of that into creating something. And maybe this will, if I don't publish this, at least in the future, when another crisis happens, I can listen to this podcast, which actually was something that I did during the times when I couldn't sleep. And as well, I was listening to past podcasts that I had recorded. I was listening to my past meditation. I thought that if my mind or my voice is constantly saying all these negative things, maybe I can drown it out or override it with positive things. And that did actually help a lot. So here I am back recording this. Okay, let's I think, yeah, I've gone through the things that I wanted to talk about here, updating about what life has been like since moving to Australia, the crisis that we've been through, the lesson of using the pressure and Parkinson's law. It is interesting. I want to be able to use this moving forward. Actually, let me talk about that. So in the next year, there are a few deadlines now that I can see that basically I need to be able to use effectively to bring out the best in me and to be able to achieve my goals. Number one is that when the business starts running, we'll need to be able to operate. Otherwise, operate profitably. Otherwise, we'll just be burning cash, and cash is a finite resource. And so that is, I guess, the fire on my ass that will happen in the next few months. So with the pressure of that means I need to create, I need to market, I need to sell and be able to serve a community with this business. The second thing is the apartment that we're moving into only has an 18-month lease, and the owner has already said that they want to sell. And we want to be able to move into a house after that, our own house after that, and be able to live in a place that we own. So that is another milestone, another deadline, another thing that will have additional pressure for me to accept and embrace and move forward with, and push and use to push me to bring out the best in me in this journey. And I think through going through this with Leah, we have been able to understand ourselves and understand each other more, which was really cool to see. Things that we weren't previously able to discuss, or things that caused miscommunication and caused arguments previously, now we're able to better allow for a non-judgmental space for each other to process each other's emotions and to soothe each other and in understanding what each other needs as well. And I'm jumping all over the place a little bit with this, but I just thought about this just now, which is another, I guess, like positive that came out of this crisis. So I think to conclude, the biggest lesson for me here in the last few weeks is to use the pressure to bring out the best in me. This Parkinson's law, things will fill up the space that we give it. So there is a deadline. That's when things will happen. So to set, I guess, harder deadlines, challenge myself more, but be able to put myself in position to be able to execute effectively, whilst also practicing ways to handle the challenges, handle the stress response, so that I can do this in a sustainable way. Continue to move forward, to embrace the challenge, the resistance, to remember the Stoic teaching that the obstacle is the way, whatever impediment to the way becomes the way. So all the things that are challenging, that are coming up, are only there for me to use, for us to learn and grow from, for us to be resourceful with, for us to be savvy with, for us to feel like, we need to come up with a solution, with a way when our back's against the wall. And to always remind myself to take things one day at a time. Even going through this right now, from week to week, things were different. From day to day, things were different. So to position myself in the best way possible to take on the challenges, but to take on those challenges one thing at a time, and then readjust, realign, adapt, and the next day have another go at it. Thank you for listening to this episode. Hopefully, for those of you that may be going through a crisis right now, will find this useful. It will pass. It will always pass. It sounds cliche, but it's true. Everything will pass. Use this crisis, use this challenge, use this as an opportunity to deepen your meditation practice, to deepen your understanding of yourself and those around you, deepen your connection with your family and friends, deepen your understanding of how to handle the challenges. And if it was a self-imposed deadline, make use of that deadline, so that that additional pressure, that pressure will allow you to take action. If it's not a self-imposed deadline, well, you can't do anything about that, and when that time comes, whatever needs to happen will happen, and lean into that and take the actions necessary. Be resourceful. Look at the things that you are able to do, able to know, you are able to do, and that you already know, the skills that you have, the money that you have, the people that you know, and just keep finding your way through it all. Thank you for listening, everybody, and making it to the end of this episode. A few more things before we end. We do have a new Instagram. Is at Habitat Mind Body. So this will have all the things to do with the functional fitness and meditation center that we're opening up in Docklands in Melbourne. For more information on this, you can check out our website, habitatmindbody.com, and in there you can sign up for our founding inhabitants promo, which is going to be 30% off for all our founding inhabitants, 30% off all of our membership packages. You can also schedule a discovery call for us to find out about you, about what you want to achieve, what you're going through, and see how we can be of service to you. Please rate us on Spotify. Again, that will help this little show that I'm starting to build again. And subscribe to our YouTube and comment on your crisis and your tactics and how you're getting through it, or maybe something that you've used in the past. And that's it. we're at the end of this first episode back, this new beginning. Looking forward to the next episode.